At what point did you realize you don't like your own kid? My son refuses any and all input. He is a graduating high school senior. He stopped going to school because he claimed social anxiety was keeping him from participating. He doesn't wash himself, sits in his room all day playing video games. He has no friends, picks his skin all the time. Gets angry if you tell him to wear deodorant. Gets angry if you give him advice of any kind. Claimed depression and anxiety. So, for 2 quarters he has essentially been homeschooled. He has a therapist, a psychologist, a counselor, and is on meds. He has been on numerous meds for these 6 months. He claims nothing works, but what that means is wildly unclear. He won't do anything to repair relationships or to boost his social confidence because he is waiting on the drugs to magically do it all for him. Went bonkers one day because he wanted me and his mom to change his pronouns, and we refused to go there with him until he got some basic mental shit together. He made it all about what we weren't doing, instead of what he won't do. How did you figure out your significant other cheated on you? My boyfriend had an ex-wife, and her father was really sick. He had to have certain medicines at specific times, and I was nice enough to come and get her, go get the medicines and deliver them to her father. I was waiting on a text that she was on her way, when I picked up my boyfriend's phone and read some of his other texts. I found out that he was cheating on me hardcore with another woman about an hour away from me. He was promising her marriage and everything. I had been completely faithful to this man. I didn't even have apps on my phone or looked in the wrong direction at another man. Here's the kicker. The day before I got to know my boyfriend was cheating on me, I had lost our child. I miscarried. He was cheating on me with her when I was literally bleeding out. I lost 1/3 of my blood volume at this point, had to be admitted into the hospital and be given fluids. They said it was a threatened miscarriage, but 2 days later, the placenta passed. I was so fucking heartbroken. Reddit, what's your top holy crap that worked moment? Back in secondary school I had to take business studies, which was easily my most hated subject. I just found it so intensely boring, I couldn't help but fall asleep in every class without fail. This was a small country school in rural Ireland, so our class only had about 20 students. Falling asleep was pretty risky since it wouldn't be difficult for someone to notice. On top of that, I sat in the first row, right in front of my easily agitated teacher, who regularly lost her temper with students and would often loudly discipline them for even the smallest infractions. That day I'd nodded off as usual, only to be jarred awake by my friend sharply elbowing me in the rib. I didn't have time to express my surprise before I realized that the teacher had asked me a direct question and was waiting for a response. Since I'd not heard her query at all and therefore had idea what her question even was, I snapped out of my dream and groggily mumbled, it means they're not doing their jobs properly? My teacher's face lit up as she broke into a rare smile. Yes, exactly. I'm so glad someone here has been paying attention. Teachers of Reddit, what's the funniest thing a student has ever said to you? Years ago, I had a junior high student who liked to use phrases and idioms to seem, I don't know, worldly, maybe. Now, most of them were pretty standard. I heard kill 2 birds with 1 stone, patience is a virtue, and don't look a gift horse in the mouth many times. Then, one day, he came to class looking absolutely disheveled and exhausted. Rough day? I asked him as he plopped into his seat. Yeah. Today sucks, he told me before pontificating, but it's like the old saying goes, Mr. Faustus, sometimes you're the boner, sometimes you're the butt. I only found out later, by asking him privately, that his father used that at home as a colorful replacement for sometimes you're the windshield, sometimes you're the bug. And one day a student told a teacher on my team my cousin's a virgin because he doesn't eat meat. My coworker said, nope, that's a vegetarian. Luckily we were teaching elementary that day, so it just went over everyone's head, but it was hard to hold the laughter in on that one. What are psychological tricks that are useful against people? As a motion graphics designer/animator, when I was freelance, I would bounce around from studio to studio. When we would work on a pitch for a client, I would basically have to pitch my designs to the art director of the studio first, then he would have to pitch those designs to the client. So I started stealing the art director's techniques of pitching to the clients and using them to pitch the designs to them. Haha. The most effective was writing down specific keywords and phrases that the art directors at the studios would use while briefing me on the pitch. I would then do my designs. Then I would pitch the designs to the art director, but I would make sure to use those exact same keywords and phrases the art director used during the brief. Because of this, I rarely had to do revisions on my designs. I think that's why I won so many pitches. I was able to survive as a freelancer in LA for 10 years. I'm now an art director at one of the best studios in the industry. So yeah, it works. What have you witnessed that will haunt you forever? I remember my BF at the time got into a mild motorcycle accident, called me to let me know where he was going to be at in the ER. I showed up at the hospital, and as I was there I seen paramedics and everyone rush from the ambulance who had this guy who was covered in blood, just motionless, paramedics, doctors yelling information, scattering, grabbing what they needed and doing their absolute best to keep this person staying alive. Turns out the guy was just a kid who turned 21, it was his birthday that day. Clearly was wasted when friends let him get behind the wheel and drive. SMH, my heart just broke. Just remembering the smell of heavy blood and whatever else strong, possibly alcohol scent, and thinking of the horror the mother/parents must be in getting the news, shook me to the core, hoping my children will never have to be in a situation like that. If he survived or not, but it was just one of the sad things I remember witnessing. It's crazy to think how often they see these sort of things. Accidents at hospitals I used to think are like cutting your hand or breaking your arm. Those are what I see as accidents. What is the best paranormal experience you have ever had? Was walking up my stairs one morning when I was 16. I had just gotten up from a heavy sleep, so I was pretty groggy. I had my big blanket wrapped around me like a cape. About 1/3 of the way up the stairs I slipped and started to fall back. I thought, oh no, this is gonna hurt. But it didn't, nothing happened. I felt like I'd been caught in mid-air, but like someone had me around the waist with two abnormally large hands. At this point I was fully awake. I couldn't feel anything under my feet and I was just a hint taller than I should be. I stayed perfectly still, not quite knowing if I had died or if I had fallen into another universe. But then I was moving up the stairs again, and gently landed at the top where my dog had been patiently waiting for me. My dog was now looking behind me, tail straight, ears pointed, unwavering stare into the darkness that was the basement. I didn't turn around. I just nodded and said thank you and went to the living room to sit down. I wasn't scared or afraid, but I do say hello to the basement darkness whenever I can now. What is the most physically painful thing to happen to you? As a 10-year-old I, 38M, stepped/jumped on a broken bottle while swimming in a lake. Felt a sharp prick-like feeling, though something bit me. Started crying and my older cousin ran into the water and lifted me out. I saw a lot of panicky faces around me and distinctly remember a white towel wrapped around my foot turning red real fast. Got rushed to the hospital and kind of blacked out along the way. Remember coming by in the operating room lying on my stomach. Doctor explained something about having to suture up the wound and having to give me an injection. I was probably bleeding too heavily because he didn't wait for the anesthesia to kick in. He gave me 18 stitches in total, while I screamed and cried, ripped up that paper stuff on the table, passing out a couple of times and hearing my aunt screaming and whimpering and begging him to stop. Eventually the doctor said he had to do one more, and that one I didn't feel. Afterwards I was pretty quickly over it, and being treated like a royal prince for about a week, but it kind of left my aunt in shambles. What is the most unprofessional thing a doctor has ever said to you? I struggled with drug addiction and finally caved and told my parents and wife. I was kicked out of my house at the time and living with my parents, so my dad took me to our family doctor to get some help. I was severely malnourished and severely depressed too. We walked in and sat down and I told the doctor what was going on and he laughed and said, yep, usually when people run out of money they come see me and then ask me how much pills we're going for on the street. I bawled my eyes out when we left there. No numbers to call, no go here or even a fucking pamphlet. We went back home and my mom knew a doctor that she worked with, so she called him. He told us to go to the EMERG at the hospital. I was so afraid and beat down I didn't want to go there at all. But we did. When I sat down with the triage nurse and I told her what was going on, she said, don't worry, my name, we will get you the help you need, okay? While giving me a hug. I will never ever forget that nurse and what she did. What a beautiful soul. I left there with everything I needed. Numbers to call and places to go. I did it. What was something you saw you were definitely not supposed to see? My dad once handed me his tablet and suggested I look at an ebook or something, while we were sitting around in a theater waiting for a play to start. I don't know if I misunderstood him or what, because when I brought up his Amazon Reader app, I saw that the last book he had been reading was How to Deal with a Sexless Marriage or something along those lines. Dad was very embarrassed, quickly took the tablet back, and we did not speak of what had just transpired. Another time, Dad handed me his phone and asked me to look up something for him, while we were sitting around the living room at a family get-together. When I opened his browser app, the last page open was porn. The video began autoplaying and I frantically tried to figure out how to close the tab, but all I really managed to do was look at the video for far longer than I wanted to. So I shoved the phone back at my dad and said I'm sorry, and we once again did not speak of what had just transpired. There were also another couple of times where I went to use his computer and there was either a bunch of porn open in his browser or some kind of porn in the CD tray. Dad is a bit absent-minded. What's something you're 100% sure most people are lying about? I'm a farmer and this is one of my pet peeves. Crop yields. It's expected that every farmer you talk to will lie about how well their crops did. When you meet an honest one who tells you their actual yields, it's a really awkward conversation because you're taken back by the fact you don't have to apply the bullshit factor to figure out what his yields really were. I have a neighbor who always wants to know your yields first and then automatically applies a 10% increase to his. I don't even think he realizes he's doing it, but it's always reliably 10% more than yours. The way crop insurance works in our area is that farmers report their actual yields, they have to show receipts for delivered grain, and those averages are made available to other farmers like us that want to buy insurance. Comparatively, our yields are always just a bit higher than average, but I'm always the worst farmer in the area when the "how did your crops do this year?" conversation starts. What's the stupidest thing your school/work banned? When I was in grade 7-ish, there was this kid in grade 5 who would use a lighter on the bus to burn the seats and threaten a kindergartner with it. Let's just say this kid was just mentally unfixable. One day it was eventually a knife. Of course, the older kids would record it and it did turn just a bit bloody. The next day, all the kids on my bus route were questioned, like very suspiciously. Apparently, the violent kid's mom contacted the school first, saying the older kids were filming their child without consent. The principal took all of our phones and hid them till our parents got to pick us up. Let's just say our knife evidence was confiscated and the principal didn't want to hear any petty excuse to have our phones back, so basically at the end of the day, all the kids on the bus route waited for our parents, and the older kid who had a video showed the mom the video, and of course, the mom was fuming, showed the principal. The sad part is our phone privileges at school were still taken away, and the only consequence, the violent kid had only been suspended for a week and no more bus. What's your "oh, you're not joking" moment? I work at a hotel. We have this regular who comes, but usually makes reservations ahead of time, and she has her favorite room she tries to get. Well, one day she walked in, asking for a room. I had rooms available, but not the one she wanted, and she replied, "Oh, call the guests in that room and tell them to move out so I can have it." I seriously thought that was a joke and I played along, saying I'll get right on that, as I was getting her info in the computer. All of a sudden she said, "Aren't you going to call them?" "Call who?" "Those guests in that room so I can have it." "Oh, you really weren't joking?" I told her that we don't do that. If she wanted that room, she needed to call ahead. "I have a room. I know it's not your preferred room, but it's all I've got, and you can take it or leave it, but I'm not moving a guest out." She seemed almost taken aback by that, but I told her that if she didn't take the room I had, she wouldn't get anything. She calls ahead now, but I was mortified and shocked she actually tried this stunt, and actually meant it. Who was the worst person you've met? I used to work for the sleaziest piece of shit ever. Ran a bar for well over 20 years and never gave anyone a raise ever. The bar manager told me he made $300 a week. When wages went up in my state, he threw a massive hissy fit and refused to raise them. That was after I quit. I don't know if anyone reported him or whatever happened with that. He would go to Europe 3 times a year while his kitchen staff lived under the poverty line. He lost his shit once because a waitress worked a 13-hour shift and was given a free meal by management. Total garbage human being. I could write 10 more paragraphs, and him driving drunk all the time, sexually harassing the staff, lying about everything, telling racist/sexist/homophobic jokes, and having rank, nasty breath. I knew there were bad people in the world before I met him, but it really shocked me how someone could be so relentlessly putrid in every way, go to sleep at night and be fine with it.